In this lecture segment, we are talking about icons in Byzantine worship and art. We will focus on a couple of surviving icons from the monastery of St. Catherine of Mount Sinai in Egypt. One of the key issues that arises in Byzantine art relates to icons. Icon comes from the Greek word for image. In art history, we usually use it to refer to a holy image, a depiction of holy figures. Icons were a significant part of Byzantine worship, and using an icon in prayer let the worshiper communicate with the saints depicted. Icons were a way for people to access the spiritual. They even played a role in daily life. For example, if a well dried up in Constantinople, people would lower a sacred image or icon down into the well to bring back the water. The gates to the city of Constantinople had icons on them. People would wear miniature icons in the form of amulets, and even in this image, an imperial grandmother teaches her granddaughters how to venerate an icon through the practice of aspasmos, or kissing the icon. In 726 CE, the emperor banned icons, and almost all the images that were in Constantinople were destroyed or covered between 726 and 753 CE. Here we see a depiction of iconoclasm, meaning image breaking, from 850 CE, after iconoclasm was over, that shows the Patriarch of Constantinople sponging an icon with white paint, erasing it in this mocking image of a church leader who was an iconoclast. Images were banned and destroyed for a variety of political and religious reasons. The political reasons were that the emperor wanted to integrate Muslim and Jewish populations into the empire, and images were a significant impasse to making that possible. Islamic art inside of sacred structures is aniconic, meaning no images. The presence of holy figures in sacred structures was something that was offensive to Muslims and Jews at this moment in time. Another development that may have caused the emperor to ban icons was the rapid expansion of Islam, which threatened the Byzantine Empire, and made them concerned that deity was not on their side and instead favored Muslims. So they felt that by removing images from religious practice, they might end up being able to restore the favor of deity. There were also doctrinal reasons for banning images, including the potential for blasphemy by breaking the second commandment to not make any graven images or idols, and the idea that any visual depiction of deity must be a lie because God is incomprehensible. In 843, icons were restored in the celebration that today is called the Triumph of Orthodoxy, when icons were reaffirmed as an essential aspect of religious worship. There are many arguments for the appropriateness of images in religious worship, that an icon is different than the real thing, that Christ was mortal so it's okay to depict him, that images can be used to teach, and that they work miracles so deity must be okay with them. They are a key element of religious practice in the Orthodox Church, the church that grows out of the Byzantine Empire, an iconophilic or image-loving religion. Now, it's not weird that a monotheistic faith had issues with images being an essential part of religious practice. All three religions of the book, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, tend to take issue with sacred imagery that depicts human figures. What's particularly weird about this story, then, is that the Byzantines rejected iconoclasm after about 100 years and brought images back in such a central role. During iconoclasm, whole bodies of art historical material were wiped out, but gratefully a couple of icons survived at a remote location at Mount Sinai in Egypt at the monastery of St. Catherine. We see Justinian's patronage here in the church and the reinforced walls. This is the site that is traditionally believed to have been where the story of Moses and the burning bush happened. It's a remote pilgrimage location. We're talking about two important icons that survived at this location, which you see here. This is a depiction of Christ as Pantocrator, meaning all-powerful. This is the earliest surviving depiction of Christ in this type. It was created on wood using encaustic, which is a technique in which hot wax is mixed with pigment and painted onto the wood panel when hot, solidifying as it cools. The image is created using multiple layers of hot wax, so the surface of the painting is gradually built up and creates a luminous painting that appears to glow from the inside. As you enter any Orthodox church today, you will see this, the Pantocrator, throughout the church. It's an iconic painting. Christ is shown frontally and fills the painting. It is not a narrative work. It's not telling us a story. It is focusing on a holy figure. The artist is taking big spiritual concepts and expressing them in the painting. So he moved away from Roman naturalism and depicts instead an elongated Byzantine figure that shows Christ not naturalistically but symbolically. We see two halves of his nature being shown. On the left side, from our point of view, he is making the sign of the blessing and looks relatively merciful. But on the right side, from our point of view, he is holding a book of the law and looks much more like an intense judge. And in this digital alteration, each half of the figure has been repeated. We see Christ doing the sign of the blessing on the left, looking relatively merciful and kind, in contrast to the intense Christ on the right, looking like a stern judge of humanity. We see an artist grappling with showing multiple different aspects of Christ and carefully choosing visual tactics to depict the vastness of deity within a single image or icon. Our key focus in dealing with Byzantine icons is this representation of the Virgin and Child with saints and angels. This is also an encaustic work on wood panel. It depicts military saints, Theodore on the left and George on the right, two dragon slayers. Dragon slaying related to destroying paganism and ignorance, so they are both champions of the Christian cause. And they flank a depiction of the Virgin and Child enthroned, above which are two angels who look up toward the hand of God. The specific type of iconography shown here in the form of a Virgin and Child is something called the Theotokos, which is a depiction of Mary as the Mother of God, as the Christ-bearer, as the seat of wisdom. And this is an old iconography. You see examples of similar iconography here from a Neolithic village in the ancient Near East, an Etruscan example, an Egyptian example. This work of art is an example of the syncretism we've talked about, as an iconography is given new meaning in a new context. In this case, instead of a fertility goddess, we have Mary holding the Christ child, which will become one of the most common iconographies in European art. We see again our standard Byzantine figures that are stretched and appear to not have much in the way of weight with their Barbie doll-like feet. They have larger, symmetrical eyes and stare directly out at the viewer. We see areas where space is compressed, such as the stacking of the saints and the angels. But at the same time, we see that the knees of the Virgin are foreshortened, and that the drapery covering her body is showing the knees underneath her gown. The footrest seems to project, and we end up with a sense of torsion in the representation of space. The faces are modeled. Look, for example, at the muscles and the necks of the angels. And then we also have extensive patterning in the garments, as you see in the St. George on the right. We have that blending again of aspects of Roman naturalism with the stylization of Byzantine art. Flat areas and 3D areas, individualization with patterning, and abstraction versus things that are more representational, that look more like our natural world. We immediately get a sense in looking at this image that it is otherworldly, that it is a heavenly image and shows a spiritual reality. The extensive use of gold and spatial ambiguity in the scene helps us to understand that it is a different world from ours. The visual structure of this icon is deeply theological. Think about who is looking at you. The figures in the icon who are connecting with the viewer are the saints, who lived and died just like regular mortal people. And then the Virgin does not look directly at you, she instead looks slightly up. And the angels direct our attention all the way up to the hand of God. In essence, we connect with the saints pass our concerns to the Virgin, and the Virgin carries them up to the angels, and they are passed up to deity in this triangular composition. We have two ways that we move through this image visually, both from the outside into the middle of the image, and then up the central portion of the image. We refer to this arrangement of the sacred figures as hieratic order. We talked about hierarchic scale with the ancient Near East, the biggest guy is the most important, but hieratic order refers to placement, with figures being arranged according to their closeness to deity. If you enter an Orthodox structure today, you'll know where the images are supposed to be according to this hieratic order. An image of the Virgin and an image of John the Baptist should flank the depiction of Christ as Pantocrator on the icon screen at the front of the church, for example. So we as the viewer on earth offer prayers to the saints. They communicate with the Virgin, and the Virgin passes the prayers upward to the hand of God, as we are able to access deity through something called intercession, a doctrinal concept that man could not commune with deity on their own, and instead had to have a holy figure be in between man and God. The Virgin, as she so often does in Byzantine art, connects the earthly and heavenly realms, as she is the holy figure who literally brought the divine into the world by being the vessel for Christ. In essence, we have a ladder to heaven, a way to gain access to deity through intercession that is visualized in this icon, showing us how images could be a tool as part of worship at this time. Byzantine art was so concerned with ascension and spiritual movement. We saw this at the Hagia Sophia as the dome pulls our attention upwards. And here we have an image that visualizes this ascension, showing us climbing spiritually through clear, visual or formal tactics and careful iconography to build the viewer a spiritual gateway. And this is one of our big themes in dealing with Byzantine art, how art makes spiritual experiences tangible. This also reaffirms the central place of images in religious practice and shows the clear role that images played for the Byzantines in facilitating spiritual experiences that bring the viewer closer to deity.